Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for July 3rd, 2024. My friend and colleague David Shavin reminds us in today's Executive Intelligence Review Daily News that the Founding Fathers were not opposed to taxation by government. They opposed taxation without representation, a very significant distinction. As a British colony, they had nothing to say about where their tax revenue went, whether it was invested properly for them, because it went straight to the coffers of the British East India Company and the banks of the City of London. They were deprived of the rights which they called unalienable rights. Rights, quote, to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, unquote. That was a phrase from the Declaration of Independence, which tomorrow, on July 4th, we'll celebrate our nation's Declaration of Independence. And I would recommend that people take the time to read it, to become familiar with the concepts on which our nation was founded. I'm going to read from the second paragraph to give you a sense of the birthright of all Americans. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, that's what the Founding Fathers said. The creation of America was the first major successful anti-colonial revolution. The Founding Fathers were unwilling to submit to the arrogant demands of the British oligarchy. And we showed that nations and governments, based on such principles, can create and build a government which will serve the interests of its citizens, because it is run by its citizens, what Abraham Lincoln called government of, by, and for the people. I don't have to tell you how far removed we are from that concept today, from that vision. The very same oligarchy which we defeated in the American Revolution rule the world today. Then it was the British East India Company, but that was dissolved in 1874. But it continued through the policies of the City of London and the banks and financial institutions there. As the British Empire physically declined, it became increasingly dependent on the military force of the United States to sustain the looting demanded by the banks and corporations of the Anglo-American oligarchy. Now, today, much of the world is prepared to bid a not-so-fond farewell to the Anglo-American Empire and its unipolar order. This is what the fuss about de-dollarization is about. It's not anti-American. It's against the policies that the American government are enforcing on behalf of banks and financial institutions. An example of this rebellion is that today and tomorrow, 25 nations will be meeting in Astana, Kazakhstan, at the Heads of State Council of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This includes Russia, China, and a number of the nations of the Global South and Asia, the nations that are part of what Putin has defined as a Eurasian security grouping. On their agenda is ending the last vestiges of control over their nations, asserted by London and its allies, enforced by US and NATO military power, Instead, they wish to use the Belt and Road Initiative and similar related great infrastructure projects which will bring benefit to their people and their nations. In other words, as the United States, in the first 2 decades of our existence, established a principle of American system physical economics through the idea of national banking, of investment in infrastructure, of a credit policy that goes to producers of real wealth. As we built our nation that way, this is the direction being taken now by the BRICS nations, by the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, by the Eurasian Economic Union, and many other bilateral and multilateral organizations. They will not submit any longer to the arbitrary rules-based order which exists to feather the nest of the wealthiest people in the world who operate above nations. That is, the corporate conglomerates that dominate the global economy today and work through institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and through the central banks, such as the Federal Reserve or the Bank of England or the European Central Bank. These central banks are private banks that are run by the largest of the private banks and serve the interests of funds such as BlackRock, Vanguard, JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, and so on, and do not act in the interests of people of sovereign nations. And this is the rebellion we're seeing globally that has the generic name de-dollarization. They will not submit to having to trade only in dollars and in terms of trade dictated by the corporations of the global oligarchy. So the good news is that for those nations that are collapsing now in the West, the good news is that the leaders of these new multilateral institutions are inviting us to join. They wish to have the United States and European countries as partners. So the question for us as we approach July 4th in 2024 is, will we in the West take advantage of that offer? Will we give up our arbitrary rules-based order and demand to dominate the world in order to work with other countries? Will we use diplomacy and negotiation rather than wars and sanctions to improve conditions of all nations and, more importantly, to be engaged in mutual beneficial relations? That's the question. Wars and sanctions, where is it getting us? This policy is isolating the United States, it's isolating Europe. The governments that are committed to it are collapsing as their citizens are rejecting them, because the citizens in the advanced sector are not benefiting, as they had been accustomed to, by the looting of the nations of the global South. So the question that we have to pose to ourselves today as we celebrate July 4th, and pose to everyone, not just ourselves, are you with the anti-colonialism of the American Revolution, or are you still willing to submit as a defeated slave to the demands of the oligarchy? That's the question we should pose to ourselves on July 4th this year. I'm going to be posting in the description box links to my weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. That's at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, July 3rd. And you can participate, you can send your questions and comments to us at questions@schillerinstitute.org. I'll also be posting a statement from U.S. Senate candidate Diane Sare on reviving the true spirit of the American Revolution and the 4th of July. And there will be no update tomorrow, as I'm going to celebrate the 4th of July with my family here in Potsdam, Germany. So celebrate well, read the Declaration of Independence, and ask yourself the question, a servant of the empire or a citizen of a sovereign nation. That's the choice we all have to make.